I have great pleasure in reading out the um, a brief resume of Dr. Bhanushankar Rao, Dr. Kota Bhanushankar Rao. In fact, it's brief, but it's quite big, quite long. Please stay with me and listen to the credentials of this distinguished speaker. So, Dr. Bhanushankar Rao has obtained his BE Metallurgical Engineering from Vishweshwara National Institute of Technology, Nagpur, MTech Physical Metallurgy from IIT Bombay, and PhD Metallurgical Engineering from University of Madras. And um, so Dr. Bhanshankar Rao is actually a dedicated researcher and is internationally known expert in the development of high temperature materials and the evaluation of mechanical behavior and micromechanisms of deformation and fracture. He has high quality research work carried out, high quality research work in structure property correlations, strengthening mechanisms, creep, fatigue, thermomechanical fatigue, and creep fatigue interaction of a variety of nuclear and aerospace materials and their weldments. So Dr. Rao has provided excellent R&D support in metallurgy for the development of fast breeder reactor technology in India while working in the Department of Atomic Energy at Indira Gandhi Center for Atomic Research, Kalpakkam during 1977 to 2009. Dr. Rao has made significant research contribution in many areas, which are, I mean, it's a long list to read out. I'll move on. Currently, uh, Dr. Rao is as professor and dean, as well as Pratt and Whitney chair professor at University of Hyderabad. He has made significant contributions towards establishment of School of Engineering Sciences and Technology. Under his guidance, this central university has established excellent credentials for postgraduate education and research in materials engineering and nanoscience and technology. In the capacity of Ministry of Steel Chair Professor, Dr. Rao has contributed towards establishing high quality education research in MGIT Hyderabad during 2013 to 18. Currently, as I said, he is serving as Pratt and Whitney Chair Professor at University of Hyderabad. He has a string of awards to his name. Dr. Rao received Platinum Medal, the highest award from Indian Institute of Metals in 2016, National Metallurgist Award from Ministry of Steel in 2012 in Research and Academia category, Best Metallurgist Award from Ministry of Steel in 1995, G.D. Birla Gold Medal from the Indian Institute of Metals 2004, Binani Gold Medal in 1991, SAIL Gold Medal SAIL Gold Medal from the Institute of Metals. Most importantly, he was bestowed with NASA Appreciation Award of USA for his meritorious accomplishments towards solving several critical problems related to components of Space Shuttle main engine and Space Station Freedom. He has also received several awards from Indian Institute of Welding and Material Research Society of India. Dr. Rao served as an editor-in-chief of transactions of the Indian Institute of Metals from 2003 to 2017. That's a long stint. He is currently editor-in-chief for Indian National Academy of Engineering Publications and a member of the Apex Committee. He has 450 international publications to his credit, 450, make note of it. So Dr. Rao has served as a guest scientist at KFA Jülich, Germany during 1984 to 86, National Research Council Fellow of USA and guest scientist at NASA Lewis Research Center, Cleveland, in between 1993 and 95, Japan Society of Promotion of Science Senior Research Fellow at Nagaoka University of Technology in 2005. For his outstanding contribution in material science, engineering, technology, he has been elected fellow by ASM International, Indian National Academy of Engineering, Indian Academy of Sciences, Telangana Academy of Sciences, and the Institute of Metals. That is Dr. Kota Bhanushankar Rao for you, dear participants. So, sir, we really are very, very fortunate to have you with us. And as I have already told you, this is an Atal sponsored, AICT sponsored FDP program. We have teachers, faculty from all over the country. Going from yesterday's experience, I can tell you that they're all looking forward, and many, they're all quite interested to listen to you. Your topic today would be super alloys. And of course, there will be quite a few questions at the end. Maybe if you can talk for about 1.5 hours, plus or minus is fine. And then devote another 20 to 30 minutes for discussion, sir. So over to you, Dr. Rao. Thank you. I will also mute myself in case if there's anything, I can always hear you, sir. Over to you, sir.
Good morning to everybody. Are you able to hear me?
Yes, sir.
Yes, no problem. Good morning to all the participants and faculty who have assembled to listen this talk today. I have been given only 14 hours time to give this talk. Almost have burned the midnight oil to prepare this talk. And, because of last minute withdrawal of the previous speaker, Janaki Ram. And I hope I am able to do the justice by presenting this talk to you on Sopralize. That is the one. Brief outline of my talk is as follows. That is, I will give the definition of Sopralize, and I'll outline the applications where these are being used, how these Sopralize have been developed, what are the types and their composition. There are three types of Sopralize generally: nickel-based Sopralize, iron-based Sopralize, and nickel-iron-based Sopralize also will be there. And the Sopralize derive its strength from several phases. Microstructure consists of several phases. It depends on composition. So there are several strengthening mechanisms to contribute the strength of Sopralize at very high temperatures. The strengthening phases are known as gamma prime and gamma double prime, which will be contributing strength in the matrix, and there will be solid solution strengthening in the matrix, and the carbides will be there on the grain boundaries to impart the creep resistance at elevated temperatures. I will take one Sopralay as a case study to show you how the microstructure can be varied when the composition has been fixed, that is by giving proper heat treatments. These heat treatments are necessary because one application requires creep resistance, another application requires fatigue resistance. So the heat treatments play a very important role in dictating the grain size as well as the distribution of the strengthening phases. There are several technology development efforts over the years in order to process the Sopralize. There are different types of Sopralize, what we call Rotalize, and then Castalize, and then to extend the service temperatures of the Sopralize, some type of coatings are being given. And finally, I will sum up with some challenges and future directions in which way the Sopralize have to be developed. Sopralize are important group of high temperature materials that are capable of withstanding high temperatures, high stresses, high thermal strains, highly oxidizing atmospheres at elevated temperatures. These Sopralize are based on the base we call when in the alloy composition, the main element exceeds more than 50%, we call it as a base. So we have three types of bases, that is nickel base, iron base, and cobalt base Sopralize. And these bases will contain some amount of chromium because they have to operate at elevated temperatures where oxidation and other corrosion effects play very, very important role. And chromium will be the main allying element to impart the corrosion resistance to the Sopralize. And there are several other additions of allying elements. They are large in number. There will be 13 to 14 or 15 will be there. But each element has its own role. Sometimes one element plays different roles in Sopralize that I will explain to you. The allying elements are added to provide strength, toughness, and durability at high temperatures. Sopralize are developed in the early days based on empirism. That is, you add some element, it will contribute to some strength. You do not know what the function of it is. Later, first the alloys are developed, and later the physical metallurgy and mechanical metallurgy of these materials have been understood. I will highlight that type of things that have been happening. Soap alloys finds very wide applications. They are being used in an aircraft engine, that is gas turbine engine. You can see the gas turbine engine is there. Red colored one is the place where you have a large number of soap alloys towards the end of the combustion engine, what you have. Soap alloys also being used in industrial gas turbines, rocket engines, space vehicles, submarines, nuclear reactors, military electric motors, chemical processing vessels, heat exchanger tubing, advanced ultra supercritical power plants. In fact, I would like to say in the aircraft gas turbine engine, almost 60 to 70% of the components are made with soap alloys. Those are nickel-based soap alloys. They will be used in different forms that I will explain to you later. What is the need to have these high temperature alloys? In general, conversion of thermal energy into mechanical or other forms of energy is more efficient at high temperatures. The gas turbine engine, employing this principle in jet engine aircrafts, laid the foundation for the development of high temperature alloys, which are known as super alloys. What are the basic points you have to look into when you are selecting high temperature materials? The application temperature depends upon the melting point. If you want to go to very high temperatures, that is, if you want to use the alloy at very high temperatures, you should choose the material which is a high melting point. And the material you have chosen, now the microstructure you have established, but the stability of this microstructure is needed over the service life, over very long periods, like if you are using a nuclear reactors, that will be 30 years, 40 years, like that. Now you have given proper heat treatments to develop your structure, and that structure will give you some amount of tensile strength, impact strength, creep strength, and fatigue strength, like that. But these have to be retained over long time at the service temperatures. The resistance to oxidation and corrosion plays very important role at very high temperatures. Most importantly, soap alloys have to be made into proper shape that is required. For that, you require sufficient amount of ductility during the processing of the materials. What are the historic developments that have taken place in development of soap alloys that you can see here? These few slides, 2 slides are included to show you that the research on soap alloys has been there for a century, and the need for the soap alloys have been identified almost 4 centuries ago, and the developments are still continuing. There is no end yet. The first gas turbine was conceived in 1648. Relatively advanced steam turbines began to appear during 1800 to 1910. In 1904, a gas turbine was used for industrial electric power in Europe. The period, that is the First World War period, saw the birth of nickel chromium stainless steel, the first high temperature steel. This formed the basis for the development of soap alloys. You can see it almost, that is more than 100 years ago. The concept of jet engine powered aircraft came during 1920 to 1930. Small addition of titanium and aluminum was made to the nickel chromium stainless steel in 1929. This chromium addition has brought some amount of significant creep strengthening. This was the first concept of superalloys, that is, around 1929, the first superalloy has been developed, that is, by adding titanium and aluminum. This titanium and aluminum combine with nickel to form a strengthening phase that is known as gamma prime. Sometimes we add niobium and tantalum. Those combine with nickel to form the phase known as gamma double prime phase. These are the two phases which contribute to matrix strengthening, and we will see furthermore a little bit later. More heat resistant materials required for aircraft engine turbo superchargers prompted the further development of superalloys during 1930 to 1940. Increasing demands of advancing gas turbine engine technology accelerated superalloy developments since 1940. You see that Second World War time, this World War brought the superalloys into prominence. The First World War as well as the Second World War brought the accelerated development of superalloys. In 1940, Bradley and Taylor envisaged the existence of gamma prime, the tiny coherent phase, which is the key to the superalloy's high temperature strength. Significant understanding of physical metallurgy of superalloys was achieved during 1950 to 1970. Significant advances in process development occurred between 1970 and 1980, and developments in processing are still continuing. As I said to you earlier, this is broad classification of superalloys. Superalloys are broadly classified as follows. The first classification is based on the chemical composition. That is the base, that is either iron base or cobalt base or nickel base. Based on processing methods that have been employed, they can be either cast alloys or wrought alloys. The cast alloys will be subjected to forging and subsequent rolling and other processing methods in order to get your material in the required shape of plate or sheet or rods or any other. So wrought alloys are those which have been worked into desired shape. Cast alloys are, because of having large number of alloying elements, there may be certain type of segregation will be there, and then they are not directly amenable for processing. Therefore, they are cast into required shape in general. This is the most important slide. I said superalloys contain 14 to 15 alloying elements. We will see in nickel-based superalloys what is the role of this alloying element, which will be important for a particular purpose which it has been added. Nickel-based superalloys are defined as those alloys that have nickel as the major constituents with significant amounts of chromium. So nickel is more than 50%, and chromium will be the order of 20% in order to give you the oxidation resistance in the material. These alloys also contain cobalt. iron, and both of these elements substitute nickel in the matrix, and they contribute to solid solution strengthening of the matrix. There are elements like molybdenum, tungsten, and tantalum as major alloying additions. Their superalloys are strengthened by solid solution and second phase intermetallic precipitation. These intermetallics are those, let me tell you, which I referred earlier as gamma prime and gamma double prime. If they are not properly controlled, what will happen is these elements will contribute to some undesirable phases, which will reduce the ductility of the material. So control of composition is very, very important. The intermetallic forming elements are, as I told you, they are aluminum and titanium. They form Ni3Alti precipitate, which is coherent with the matrix. And there will be niobium and tantalum, which form Ni3 Nb, Ni3 NbTA, which is known as, the phase is known as gamma double prime. Why you need so many alloying elements in the nickel-based superalloys? Large number of alloying elements are added to derive the best combination of mechanical properties at elevated temperatures. So each alloying element has got its own function. Let me see here, a lot of elements are there, what we call the matrix class. Matrix class is nickel, cobalt, iron, chromium, molybdenum, and tungsten. They will be in the matrix. Substitute nickel by these elements, substitute nickel in the matrix. This is a gamma prime class. These are the elements, that is titanium, aluminum, and columbium and tantalum. These are the gamma prime class, what we call. These are the elements which contribute to major strengthening of the alloy in the matrix. There is a grain boundary class. These are mainly those which form carbides on the grain boundary. That is chromium, then molybdenum, tungsten, and tantalum, titanium, all these things. You can see that titanium plays an important role as gamma prime former, but at the same time, it also forms some amount of carbides generally. Oxide scale class, that is chromium and aluminum. Aluminum is the element which contributes to major strengthening in the material in the form of gamma prime phase, but at the same time, aluminum also forms alumina, and that also contributes to oxidation resistance of the alloy. Now there are some elements which will go to only grain boundaries, that is carbon, boron, zirconium, and hafnium. They contribute to grain boundary strengthening. Carbon combines with chromium to form the chromium carbide in the grain boundaries, and it forms the discrete particles of chromium carbide at the grain boundary. We require a discrete particles. Continuous phase of chromium carbide is not needed for us. Boron substitutes for carbon in the carbide to certain extents. Zirconium and hafnium are the grain boundary strengtheners. Now you can look at that. So many elements are there in the nickel-based superalloy, and making the superalloy is very, very difficult task. All these alloying elements have to be controlled during the melting and subsequent processing of the material. Why you require the base, that is nickel. Nickel-based superalloys, they're versatile high temperature alloys. because of the following reasons. Nickel is FCC in structure. It is a stable structure right from room temperature up to melting point. So we require FCC phase for high temperature alloys. Nickel is the best choice there. The FCC based structure, why you require? It is tough, it is ductile, and also has considerable microstructure stability at elevated temperatures. So I told you initially itself, microstructure what we have generated initially, the component before putting into service, not be degraded. It should be continuously maintained. If prestate get coarsened, strength will go down. If prestate spoils, then what will happen? The function uh, impaired. Therefore, it provides the microstructures. Most importantly, nickel has got very high tolerance for other alloying reactions because of its unfilled 3D shell. So it takes many alloying elements into its fold, into the matrix, without disturbing the phase stability. That is the reason why nickel has been chosen as the base for superalloys in many of the applications. The phases are dependent upon the chemical composition of the alloy. We have seen the alloying elements, so many are there. Some of these alloying elements, they form desirable phases. Some of them form the deleterious phases. Different phases constitute the microstructure. And you can see over the years from 1940 to 1990.
కరెక్ట్ పెట్టి మన లొకేషన్ గుర్తుపట్టగలవా? ఇప్పుడు మన
some interference is coming. Someone has to close their
it's regulated now. Sir, it's regulated.
Yeah, okay, fine. So strengthening phases in nickel-based superalloys are shown on the top. What we require is, first we require a fine-grained microstructure to impart the fatigue resistance and tensile strength for the superalloy. And then we require for that the, sometimes for creep resistance, we require coarse grain size. So you look at that, if you are designing a component in gas turbine engine or anywhere else where high temperatures are required, both creep resistance and fatigue resistance and tensile strength has to be taken into consideration. So there is a contradictory, requirement of microstructure with respect to grain size in case of superalloys. As I go through my lecture, at the end, I will be explaining to you how that will be done. Earlier, the composition was not controlled properly. I said that physical metallurgy of the superalloys was not known before 1960s. The alloying elements were just like added, and there was no control of the size and shape of the prestage that are getting formed. For example, initially when the superalloys developed, the carbides which are required in the isolated shape, they were not there. Isolated particles of chromium carbides were not there. There was a continuous film and there was some sort of silver type of chromium carbide has been precipitated. This type of phase, shape is not desirable for processing. I told you titanium and molybdenum will be there. They form some type of MC type of carbides. M is the metallic element that gets substitute, can be titanium carbide and other thing. Then subsequently, some of them, if they are tied up, titanium and molybdenum, they are tied up in this type of carbides. What will happen? Sufficient amount of titanium will not be available for you to precipitate your gamma prime. which gives strength to the matrix. So, molybdenum is required for providing solid solution strengthening at elevated temperatures. If the molybdenum is tied up in this type of carbides, then sufficient molybdenum will not be available to provide high temperature strength to the matrix in the form of solid solution strengthening. So all these are undesirable. Then you see that when all these refractory elements they combine, they form some phases known as TCP phases, topologically closed factor phases. All of them, they are detrimental. They are known as deleterious phases because they impede the ductility of the material. These phases are known as Laves phase, sigma phase, mu, and so many other things. They generally form in the form of needles and platelets and other thing, and processing also difficult if these shapes are present. And at the same time, when these phases form, the matrix is robbed of the allying elements, and strength of the material and ductility of the material will go down. So most importantly, what I wanted to say is chemical composition establishes various phases. Different phases create the microstructure. So that's why the microstructure plays very, very important role. If you want to have a desired microstructure for long-term service at elevated temperatures, the composition has to be controlled very properly. The undesirable phases, these are TCP phases, have been controlled in superlysis by an approach known as phase computation approach. What happened when melting and other thing is taking place, then the phase computation calculations are done for each of the allying element that is present here. Here you see that there is an equation here. Atomic fraction of each element is taken into account, and it is multiplied by electron vacancy number of respective element, and this is calculated for each element, and the summation is done for all elements, and we get NVs, that is for that alloy, a mean NV of less than 2.5 for the alloy was found to eliminate precipitation of TCP phases such as sigma, mu, and Laves. So that is the way it is taken care of by a FACOMP approach, which is nothing but a computer program. While melting is going on, the composition of the melt will be monitored, and the composition is controlled, and that eliminates the risk of brittle phase precipitation during service. So this is very, very important approach, to control the composition against the deleterious phase formation. So I was talking to you about several elements, and they contribute in different ways. Let us see. Here is a microstructure. What you have, you can see this is a microstructure. Nickel is substituted by molybdenum here in the matrix. So now nickel position has been occupied by molybdenum. Some distortion will be introduced in the lattice because the size differences of the each of these elements here. The solid solution strengthening is provided by titanium, chromium, molybdenum, and tungsten. These molybdenum and tungsten, they're very essential elements for providing solid solution strengthening, extending to very high temperatures. And then precipitation hardening, you look at this, these are the gamma prime. Here you can look at this is the gamma prime, what you have in the cuboidal shape. And here you have the two types of gamma prime, fine gamma prime as well as coarse gamma prime, which depends on the temperature that you are employed during the heat treatment. This precision hardening to the matrix is derived from the gamma prime and gamma double prime phases. And carbides, they form on the grain boundary, and then they strengthen the material against creep. Once these carbides are distributed on grain boundary in a discrete manner, they restrict the sliding of the grain boundary and will not allow any cavities or cracks to form in the material. So generally, materials are considered as polycrystalline materials. We have some grain boundaries aligned to the upright loading axis. Some grain boundaries will be transverse to the upright load axis. Transverse grain boundaries are not, are the ones which are very fast prone for creep cavities and cracks formation. Therefore, when we are using high temperature alloys, this point has to be kept in mind. The transverse grain boundaries have to be reduced in your microstructure in order to improve the creep resistance of the soper alloys. This will be done by a process known as directional solidification, such that some reduction in the transverse grain boundaries can occur, such that grains can be elongated in upright load direction, or preparation of single crystals. That I will tell you a little bit later. Now, some of these carbides I talked to you about, this titanium carbide, titanium molybdenum carbide. These are the ones which will interact with matrix at elevated temperature, and they decompose into chromium carbide in the matrix, and gamma prime they form, and they contribute to the strength. But what we have to see, we have to reduce this the MC type of carbides. Otherwise, this type of reactions will be taking place, and you will have phase instability in the material. So, in case of soper alloys, nickel-based soper alloys, we have solid solution strengthening coming from some elements, precipitation hardening of the matrix coming from some elements, and then the grain boundary strengthening coming from the carbides and borides, and then something has happened on the screen here. Let me check it. Yes. Yeah. Now it is visible on the screen.
Yes, sir, it is.
Okay. So interference came automatically. Weather conditions and other thing, are being projected here on the computer. Periodically it projects, and then automatically it interferes with the things that are going on here. Now, solid solution strengthening, you see that how the change in yield strength will be occurring in case of soper alloys. All the elements have been plotted here: titanium to cobalt, iron, molybdenum, tungsten, chromium, and then the change in yield strength that is occurring. there will be change in lattice parameter by adding the solid solution elements. Now the titanium is the most solid solution strength. But please remember, titanium is very desirable element for forming the gamma prime in material, which is the major strengthening phase. So the role of titanium, you can see that it plays in three ways. It provides solid solution strengthening to the matrix. It provides gamma prime major strengthening phase. It also participates in carbide formation. So we should be very careful in choosing the each element. Since partitioning for these phases it will be occurring, we have to carefully choose each allying element, how much it should be present in the material. You look at that soprolite, nickel-based soprolites contain cobalt up to 9 to 10%, but it is not a solid solution strengthening element. It will not form any other carbides or any other thing. But the role of cobalt is it makes all other allying elements, it retains in the matrix and substitutes for nickel and makes all other allying elements to, it says, you please go away and perform your duty. Cobalt, when it is retained in the matrix, then this titanium, aluminum, all these things, chromium, all these things, they will be shunted out from there and they will form their carbides and strengthening phases and other thing. So cobalt, though it is not forming any carbides or strengthening phases, it contributes majorly to solid solution strengthening, but it's a weak solid solution strengthener. But by occupying the nickel matrix to a certain extent, it makes all other allying elements to perform their duty. That is the way the tailoring of the composition is done. Here you see that soprolites are many. Let me tell you, hundreds and hundreds of soprolites are there, nickel-based soprolites. And let me tell you, soprolites, they call mnemonic, they call urimide, they call RM, and all these things. These are the names given to the soprolites by the companies which are producing. MAR-M means Martin Marietta. Mnemonic is, some other company. Urimide is some other company. The first name stands for the company which produces this alloy. And they designate by numbers 105, 115, mnemonic 105, mnemonic 115, mnemonic 220 or something like that. So all these numbers, each number corresponds certain composition that has been derived, given. Certain composition which is derived is given certain number. That is the way once you say mnemonic 718, which is most favorable soprolite, almost 60% of gas turbine engine is filled with components made of alloy 718. So now let us see that what in which way they contribute to the strength. I said a lot of precipitates are forming, like gamma prime precipitate and matrix you have. Once you have the precipitate, now what will happen is it will create some strain in the matrix. That will be coherent with the matrix. That means when the matrix and precipitate is having the same lattice parameter, there will be no strain in the matrix. Some amount of distortion is induced in the matrix due to precipitation of these strengthening phases, and they induce some amount of coherency strains here. For example, you take a soprolite which is known as mnemonic P16. It is a soprolite, not a nickel-based soprolite, but we call it as iron nickel-based soprolite because these are the two elements which forms the base, and both of them combined together. Nickel is 44, iron somewhere 37 or something like that. They combined, they cross 50% weight percentage, which is qualifying them to be a base. So this is iron nickel based superalloy for which chromium already added. Molybdenum is added for introducing the solid solution strengthening at elevated temperature. Aluminum and titanium has been added to produce the gamma prime. That is the way, when this composition has been developed, it is forming a gamma prime with low coherency strains. For that, for this composition, you add nickel. That means you are increasing the nickel to more than 50%. So then it becomes the nickel base. For that, you add another alloying element, which is known as niobium. Then what happens? You have another phase known as gamma double prime will be coming. Aluminum and titanium will form a gamma prime phase, and niobium, when you add it, forms Ni3Nb phase. Now, when you added these elements, this gamma double prime phase, which is forming there, is having higher lattice parameter than that of the matrix. Then you can see that how much staining of the matrix is done in the picture that is shown here. So the coherence strains due to precipitation contribute to the strengthening. If the the coherency is lost, then strengthening will go down. Like that, so many alloys derived from one alloy to the other by adding some elements, for example. Yeah, for example, here you can see that initially nickel, chromium, aluminum is there, which is developed. To the titanium has been added, and alloy known as mnemonic 80A has been developed. So alloy X750 has been developed. That is the way the tailoring of the composition and manipulating the microstructure has come in. Now I am talking to you about gamma prime. First, you see that gamma prime, what is the morphology of the gamma prime? That is very, very important. That will be here. You can see, for example, in alloy Udemit 500, you have spherical shape of gamma prime particles. And in case of iron 100, you have cuboidal shape of gamma prime particles. In 713C alloy, you have elongated gamma prime particles like this. Then the previous slide, I talked to you about the lattice mismatch between the matrix and the lattice mismatch between matrix and precipitate. That lattice mismatch dictate the precipitate shape. If the lattice mismatch is less than 0.2%, gamma prime precipitate in the form of spheres. If it is mismatch between 0.5 to 1%, it forms in the form of cubes. If mismatch is more than 1.25%, it forms in the form of plates. So this this formation of this gamma prime in different shapes will cause variation in the mechanical properties that you are looking for. For example, creep rupture life depends upon the morphology of your gamma prime phase and their volume fraction. That is, you see that how much of aluminum has to be added in order to volume fraction of gamma prime versus total hardening addition in atomic percent. For aluminum, you see that you have to add so much of aluminum in order to give you the Ni3Al prestates. When we added titanium, you see you don't need that much amount of aluminum. So aluminum and titanium function similarly. So Ni3Al Ti is the phase which is forming there. And similarly, Ni3Nb, aluminum, titanium, and other things will form. There are several other phases I said, carbides and borides. They provide little strengthening in low temperature applications due to small volume fractions. There will be 1% and 1.5%, 2%, it will not exceed. Whereas gamma prime can be, gamma prime can be up to 70%, 80%. varies from 10%, 15%, depends upon the amount of the alloying elements that you have added. Significant effect on creep properties, rupture life, and rupture strain through their influence on grain boundaries. The carbides contribute to the creep resistance, as already explained to you, at elevated temperatures. The role of carbides at low temperatures is very limited, and the gamma prime and gamma double prime are the major strengthening phases. I have shown you the morphology of the gamma prime that is forming. You can see here yield strength has been plotted as a function of temperature with the different morphologies. You see, you have the cuboidal morphology. This is the strength that varies as a function of temperature. If you have a rod type of gamma prime, this is the strength goes up like this. If you have plate type of gamma prime, strength goes up like that. You can see that generally what we expect is the strength, for example, steels, if you take mild steel, strength falls down very rapidly with increasing temperature. But in case of nickel-based superalloys, you see the strength is maintained up to very high temperatures because of several strengthening mechanisms that are operating. But when you change the shape of your precipitate that is forming gamma prime precipitate, you see that strength is increasing. That secondary hardening is coming here. You see that at elevated temperatures, strength is getting increased. That means, this is a phenomena which is desirable. You see, instead of falling strength, we have a strength at elevated temperature, it is increasing. That's why the composition control, the control of your precipitate shape is very, very important. See that gamma prime particle size also plays very, very important role. Not only the shape, and then the size also plays very, very important. You see, this is the hardness plotted against the particle size, gamma prime size. On increasing the gamma prime particle size, strength is increasing. You look at this in the nickel 20% chromium superalloy, but after certain size, it falls down. Here. So here, when the gamma prime size is small, certain type of mechanisms are operating for contributing strength. And if you have the coarse gamma prime, strength falls down. So atom size here, for example, is around 40 to 50 nanometers that has been shown. What are the, look at this one, this graph, the creep life, how it is varying a function of volume percentage of gamma prime at different temperatures. At 705 degrees centigrade, on increasing the volume fraction of gamma prime, your strength is increasing. That is creep strength. You see, rupture life is much more, and at 705 degrees centigrade, and it keeps on increasing. On going to 760 degrees centigrade, still volume fraction increase contributes to creep rupture strength, but it's much less. If you go to 870, you look at that, it is coming down. If you go to 980 degrees centigrade, still it is much lower. So contribution to strength, creep strength, depends upon the application temperature. That is what we would like. So as the temperature is increased, the size of gamma prime increases, creep rupture strength decreases with increase in size of gamma prime at a given volume fraction. On increasing the temperature, you can see that the strength is, creep rupture strength is coming down. Though to a certain extent, with increasing volume fraction of gamma prime, creep rupture strength is increasing. That means that the volume fraction plays very, very important. Size plays very, very important role. Morphology of the precipitate plays very, very important role. Look at this. What happens? This is the same figure what I have shown earlier. Now has been replotted, strength versus particle size. that is increasing initially with particle size, strength is increasing, and it is theoretically it has to go up like that, but that will not happen. But after certain peak size of gamma prime, the strength will be coming down like this. This is due to different mechanisms that are operating. When your particle size is below the critical size here, there is a mechanism known as particle cutting mechanism will be operating. Gamma prime will be cut by the dislocations passing through the matrix. When you go to very high particle sizes, the gamma prime will be looped. That is, it will be bypassed by looping. It will not cut. Once the particle is cut, then their the coherency and all those things will be playing very, very important role. Here, when particle is cut, you see that your strength increase will depend on volume fraction and particle size. And when the particle is cut, there's an ordered phase of which is known as gamma prime, which is an ordered phase. It is cut. It will form an antiphase boundary, and that will be giving to very much high strength. When R1 looping mechanism is operating at high particle sizes, you see that the particle size is spacing and other things are inversely proportional. Here it is directly and it is indirectly proportional. Relationship between gamma prime size and alloy strength is determined by the way in which the dislocations bypass the particles, whether it's a particle cutting or looping. And gamma prime is below a critical size, particle cutting occurs, and strength is proportional to R raised to R. When gamma prime is above the critical size, dislocation looping around gamma prime occurs. In this case, strength is inversely proportional to particle radius. Here. This is very, very important. Now, the different phases have to be put at different places. For that, what we have to do, different heat treatments have to be given. Composition is same, but the size, the shape, volume fraction, all these things depend upon your heat treatment. Grain size of the material, superlight depends on the solution treatment. Now, solution treatment is given at, this heat treatment cycles are employed for nickel-based superalloys after forming and before employing in service. That is after fabrication of your component and before they are put in service. So solution treatment is given at very high temperatures, about 1040 and above, 1040 degrees centigrade and above, to dissolve all the gamma prime and some of the carbonates. Because we are working at different temperatures earlier during fabrication. So depending on the temperature, we'll be forming gamma prime and carbides in there, but they have to go into solution because you have to, realize the full potential of the superalloy strengthening phases by putting them at appropriate locations in the microstructure. So the treatments subsequently which are given to the superalloys after solution treatment, they are given double aging treatments or triple aging treatments. One is if you are employing double aging treatments, one is called intermediate aging treatment, another is called final aging treatment. The goal of intermediate aging treatment is to precipitate the carbides in optimum distribution on the grain boundaries. This is required for imparting the creep resistance at elevated temperatures. This final aging treatment is to precipitate your strengthening phases gamma prime and gamma double prime as very fine precipitate and homogeneously distributed in the matrix. So superalloys, generally nickel-based superalloys are given the solution treatment followed by double or triple aging treatments. Triple aging means in between there is an aging treatment can be given in order to precipitate your gamma prime strengthening phase in different sizes. One is coarse precipitate, fine precipitate, and like that. So I will give you an example here. In case of mnemonic P16 superalloy, which is very, very simple superalloy. You see that this is a nickel iron based superalloy. Earlier I was telling that base is, you see that in nickel and iron, in each case is less than 50%. So combinedly they exceed that of 50%. So we call it as nickel iron based superalloy. And to that chromium of 16.5 is added for oxidation resistance. And the titanium and aluminum, you see 1.2% each is added to form your gamma prime. Carbon of 0.07% is there in it. It combines with chromium that is present here to form the chromium carbides on the grain boundaries. Molybdenum gives you the high temperature solid solution strengthening. And the sulfur and boron have to be kept to very low levels. All these things that will be controlled. Manganese and copper invariably get included, which comes from the other alloying elements. So treatment employed for this superalloy, you can see that the solution treatment at 140 degrees centigrade. If you go to higher temperatures, above 1040, grain coarsening will be occurring. But what we require for fatigue resistance, a fine grain microstructure is required, which is free from carbide and gamma prime. So 1040 degrees centigrade is enough to cause all these earlier precipitated carbides and gamma prime to take into solution. So I call this as microstructure A in the solution annealed condition. I give a double aging treatment after solution treatment here for microstructure B to form gamma prime in the peak aged condition. Earlier graph you have seen that there's a critical size that is of 18 nanometers for this. By aging it's at 800 degrees centigrade, first I precipitated M236 carbides, and later at 700 degrees centigrade for keeping 16 hours, I precipitated spherical gamma prime. Now another treatment I have given such that microstructure will be in the overaged condition. That means gamma prime instead of 18 nanometers at the peak is the condition. Now you have gamma prime at 35 nanometers, which is in the overaged condition. Here you see the heat treatment that has been employed in between. Intermediate aging treatment of 900, it gives you MC type of carbides, titanium carbide. For me at 800, the MC titanium carbide is not present, MC is not present. That means that intermediate aging temperature dictate the type of precipitate form. Then finally, here I have 700 degrees centigrade, but here it's 150 degrees centigrade. At slightly higher temperature is there for gamma prime precipitation. Since I am applying higher temperature, gamma prime get coarsened in case of microstructure C. But full precipitation of gamma prime will occur at applying low aging temperatures, final aging temperatures. So that means in the microstructure C, still some amount of gamma prime forming elements are there in the matrix. But when you go to high temperatures during service, they may precipitate as gamma. Here you can see that microstructure B, which is given double aging treatments, what we have, the grain boundary, you see that the grain boundary is a matrix, grain boundary, these are the discrete chromium carbide precipitates, M23C6 precipitates. This is the fine gamma prime, spherical gamma prime, you can see that. That is the way that has been formed in the three treatments. When I have gone for microstructure C, where I use the intermediate aging temperature high titanium carbide precipitate, you see the distribution of the precipitates in the previous microstructure, which are discrete and uniformly distributed here. But in this case, shape also differed and they are widely spaced. You see the gamma prime also got coarsened because I have used the higher aging temperature. Why I have brought this to your notice is your composition is fixed, but you can vary your properties by giving various heat treatments, different heat treatments. You look at that one. This one clearly shows alloy is same. Initial chemical composition is same. Only the heat treatments are different. here the fatigue resistance is plotted. That is the plastic strain amplitude versus number of reversals to failure under fatigue conditions. These are known as strain life plots, for example, at 650 degrees centigrade, 923 K. What will be happening for solution annealed material? You see that the fatigue resistance is quite good. For microstructure B in the peakage condition, look at that, the fatigue resistance is getting decreased, and the overage condition gave you poor fatigue resistance. But see, in case of B, what is happening there? If I conduct my tests at high strain amplitudes and try to extrapolate to the service conditions, which are difficult to, it takes very long time, service condition test, we have to apply low strain amplitude. If try to extrapolate the high strain data to low strain levels, I will be making mistake. If high strain data I take and make it like this, the curve will be like this. And I say that double edge condition, the peak-aged alloy will give better fatigue resistance. But actually, that is not the case. When you go to low strain amplitudes, your fatigue resistance is getting decreased. So very, very important for you, what is happening during service, you have to know at low strain amplitudes and other things. So that is where the strengthening mechanisms will be coming to play an important role. In solution annealed condition, you see that the dislocations are there in the planar slip bands. Here, the number density of the slip bands varies as a function of strain amplitude. I have 0.25%, 0.4%, and 0.6%. The strain amplitude has increased. The dislocations are passing through in the planar slip bands like this. This is a desirable phenomenon. Planar slip gives you better fatigue resistance. Planar deformation in the matrix gives you better fatigue resistance. That is occurred in the microstructure A, that is solution annealed condition. But most importantly, you see that dislocations are separate. In the slip band, they are separate. But when you peak-age the alloy, these dislocations will not be like this, because your matrix will contain gamma prime prestates that will be cut by the dislocations passing through, and you have the first dislocation cutting the precipitate and second dislocation be passing through. I was talking about the strengthening mechanisms. When during service, if some gamma prime is getting precipitated, they will be very fine, and that will be cut by the dislocations passing through planar slip bands. You can see dislocation pairs there. This is the indication of gamma prime getting cut, because the precipitates are very fine. You cannot see the fine precipitates. Then if your heat treatment is such that the full potential of precipitating gamma prime is not there, some gamma prime can precipitate during service, then shearing of the precipitate can happen. And owing to the distribution of the particles, we cannot say this is the critical size always. So there will be some distribution. Some coarse particles in the same structure get looped up, like what is there here. And some of the fine precipitates get sheared up, and then mixed mode deformation will be there, indicating gamma prime shearing and R1 looping. Here I have given presence of coarse gamma prime initially and subsequent precipitation of fine gamma prime during LCF testing in microstructure C promoted operation of R1 looping as well as dislocation shearing of gamma prime. The combined action of these processes caused face thread fracture and lower fatigue resistance in the material. You see, in the solution annealed condition, fatigue crack gets initiated from surface and propagates in transgranal manner in the form of striations. This type of fracture is indication of better fatigue resistance in the material in the solution annealed condition. You see in the microstructure B, where you have that high strain amplitude transgranular crack propagation. At low strain amplitudes, you have the mixed mode propagation. Transgranular plus intergranular striations are missing at certain places. Intergranular cracks are there. So since you have the mixed mode fracture, fatigue life has decreased drastically at low strain amplitudes. So in the double-edged condition microstructure B. In microstructure C, where the precipitation of fine gamma prime is coming during testing, you see the phase-state, cleavage phase-state fracture occurring like this. So composition of the material is same, but you have given different heat treatments. If the material is going into service in different heat treatments, it will have its effect on fatigue resistance of the material. That is through deformation and fracture that is occurring. So I'll go quickly from here. I have a few slides. I have shown the initially development. There is a lot of paradigm shift in the technology development of Sopralize. Conception of Sopralize took place around 1940 in the form of mnemonic ATA, and jet engine came into picture up to 1950, and then several lies have been developed. Subsequently, the material has to be very, in order to perform very well in the surface, Sopralize should be very clean. They should not have any inclusions. They should not have any primary carbides undissolved. Therefore, from air induction melting, it has been shifted to vacuum melting. Now, Sopralize are produced by vacuum induction melting process, and then aligned. Already I have discussed with you that variations that have come, and the processing now involves vacuum induction followed by vacuum arc remelting or electroslag refining. Certain times, if you want to have very high performance in the Sopralize, you have to use triple melting process, vacuum induction melting followed by vacuum arc refining, vacuum induction melting followed by electroslag refining followed by vacuum arc refining. You can see that here, what is the advantage of pre-melting, vacuum induction melting and the vacuum arc refining. They have low oxygen and better cleanliness when you apply these two processes together, one after the other. Increased uniformity, top to bottom and center to edge of ingot, uniformity in composition and structure, reduced anisotropy in mechanical properties because the material is more homogeneous. There is no segregation at all. There is reproducibility from cast to cast. Always it is not possible to produce material 100 tons or something like that. We have to use furnaces of 10 tons, 25 tons. Therefore, there will be 4 casts in 100 tons. So reproducibility should be there in composition from one cast to the other. It is possible by employing these processes. Improved forgeability, less forging required to achieve consolidation, and low inclusion content and fine size of this one. Here in this picture, you can see air melting and ESR we have used. This is the combination of yield strength and toughness we are getting. If you are using vacuum induction melting and electroslag refining, you see that strength has gone up. If you have used a triple melting process, VAM and ESR VR, this has gone up clearly. And what you have to choose is don't use the scrap. When the scrap is there, the properties are, you get properties, what you get will be lesser. You see pure virgin material, if you use, for developing the Sopralize, you see that how much difference is there in melting of the scrap and melting of the pure virgin materials. The property that reduction area gets dramatically improved by using vacuum melting process. Nowadays, invariably, Sopralize are processed through vacuum induction melting followed by vacuum arc refining process. Generally, Castalize cannot be forged and other things, but Castalize can be used at higher temperatures than that of Rotalize. We have a large number of refractory elements in the Sopralize. Because of that, the refractory elements are having high melting points, and then we have to work at very high temperatures. Hot working has to be done. It is practically impossible. To overcome this difficulty, advances have been made in vacuum melting and casting technologies towards development of near net shaped products with complex profiles such as turbine blades and vanes. All cast Sopralize can be grouped as conventionally cast Sopralize, directionally solidified superlies, and single crash superlies. These are some of the examples of the single crystal superlies, what were there. Now you look at this, what it is mean. Initially, I was telling that material is polycrystalline and aqueous. This is the structure what we have. Transverse grain boundaries are not required because they produce the creep cavities at elevated temperatures. Therefore, we have to eliminate the transverse grain boundaries and produce grains like this in the form of directional solidification we use, and then grains are produced like this. Nowadays, completely the grain boundaries are eliminated and single crystal superlies are produced for the turbine blades, for gas turbine blades. You can see those products for Kaveri engine, which have been produced at DMRL, Hyderabad. These are directionally solidified. You see the grains are oriented in this direction. Grains are oriented in this direction. See the performance of the wrought alloys and directionally solidified alloys and single crystal alloys. Here you have the name of the superalloy and you have the creep rupture life here at 850 degrees centigrade and 350 megapascals. You see that single crystal superalloys where we do not have any transverse grain boundaries or no grain boundaries at all gives better creep rupture life compared with wrought alloys which have the fine grain structure distributed more. You can see here single crystal alloys offer improved fatigue, creep rupture, oxidation, and coating properties, resulting superior turbine engine performance and durability. Here you see the initially we have the wrought alloys. Here, this is temperature for 1000-hour creep life. Over the years has been plotted here. These are wrought alloys, and then we have conventionally cast alloys. What we have, and you have the directionally solidified superalloys, and then now we have the single crystal alloys here. Over the years, how the processing technology has changed, and it is a continuous process which is still continuing. Single crystals have to be produced on industrial scale in order to put in the engines and derive the benefit of using the engine at very high temperature.
Sorry to disturb you, Dr. Rao. Maybe we can conclude in a minute or two so that some questions can be taken.
I have 3 slides to complete in 2 minutes time. Here you can see the processing of materials to optimize properties location by location. Here you have the turbine disc. The turbine disc is a dual property disc. What we require is the better creep resistance in the rim, and then in the bore we require the LCF resistance. Now you look at that both these properties have to be combined. You have to produce coarse grains in the rim and fine grains in the core. So this has been achieved, and the work has been done at DMRL, and that is the disc that has been produced, has been shown to you. So this is the over the years things that have been changed. You see that temperature capability, how it has increased in 2020. What we are now, you can see that in order to improve the temperature capability of the superalloys, thermal barrier coatings have to be put on that one. Which stabilized zirconia based TBCs have been developed on single crystal superalloys, gas superalloys, and further developments on mullite based coatings are being developed for intermetallic single crystal superalloys. And that is the last slide. There are a lot of challenges in the development of high temperature materials and process. Multi-scale and multi-physics modeling and simulation tools have to be developed. Then effects of multiple stimuli for new materials and process. Thermal barrier coatings technology has to be developed. Processing of the materials by tailoring the microstructure location by location. In the same part, different properties, gradient in properties required. Some location required some property, other location requires another property. So the parts have to be designed and processed to achieve these effects. We require the sensor for monitoring the temperatures and correctly assessing the in-service performance. Component behavior with respect to all possible material degradation modes have to be assessed. There is a need for development of cost-effective new material system requires multiple partners, that is industry, universities, and laboratories across the globe. All we have to work together further in developing the supervised capability for high temperatures. I would like to thank one and all for listening patiently, and very sorry for the breakdown of the internet in between. Thank you very much.
Sir, thank you, Dr. Kota, for a wonderful presentation on superalloys. You touched upon everything, the fundamentals, the metallurgy, the strengthening mechanisms, the processing, the applications, and everything, with a nice photo at the end of the Shore Temple of Mahabalipuram.
I worked 25 years, that's why I have put it.
Oh, okay, you are there. All right. So, Professor Kota, if you can see the chat box, there are a few questions. You can answer them, and then if there are any oral questions, you can take them. But I'm afraid whatever it is, we may have to stop at 11:25. So there is. Can you see the chat box, Dr. Rao?
Comments.
So you'll have to scroll up a little bit. The first question is something that I can ask you if you are not able to see. The question is from Ambigai Rajashekaran. How can we, sir, how can we identify which type of precipitates are formed?
Yeah, this, where to do the composition analysis, from the morphology we can identify, but then we're observing transmission electron microscopy, the composition analysis we can get. The elements that are present we can get, from that we can say.
And there's a next, from Raj Shekhar Hanendra. How to identify the property changes in gamma prime particles, sir? How to identify the property changes? By gamma prime particles.
Yes, we have shown you particle size plays very, very important role. Fine gamma prime is required for getting better properties in materials. In many cases, the size change, that is, at the end I said that the monitoring sensors are required to know what is the temperature that is operated. So we have the plots generated in the beginning itself as a function of temperature, how gamma prime get coarsened with increasing temperature and everything. Once we know the temperature, then we can say this is the size that is there, and the changes in composition.
Yes.
As such, gamma prime will be there. It is a stable phase, but only coarsening will be occurring due to exposure at high temperatures.
Slightly the audio is not very clear. Anyway, Dr. Rao, there is one question. Sir, can you please mention titanium Inconel based superalloy applications?
Titanium based superalloy.
Inconel.
Inconel is nickel based.
Okay, titanium Inconel. Is there something called titanium Inconel based nickel superalloys?
No, basis. That's why I was emphasizing always, in order to remove this type of confusion. Bases are only two: nickel, cobalt gate, iron base. Titanium is added as an element, but there are some intermetallic alloys which are known as titanium aluminides. They are different class of materials, but they are also used in gas turbine engines. They are intermetallic.
Participants, if you have anyone wants to ask questions orally, you can do so. Maybe 2 questions at the most. Anybody wants to ask oral questions? Go ahead, please. Looks like the questions are there. I mean, there was on the chat box a few questions typed, and I have asked you those questions, Dr. Rao. And orally, no one has come forward as of now. I think we should profusely thank you on behalf of the Department of Mechanical Engineering, MS Ramesh of Technology, AICTE, ATL, and on behalf of participants, especially for the fact that you agreed to speak to us on this occasion, even though we, came to you at the last moment. So thank you so much for being with us. This is a wonderful topic, super alloys, and I hope the participants will take